Welcome to the Infinity Loop Group. I'm Riley Burns.
I'm Chris DeVorce.
And we're going to dive into discernment, a very important skill in our lives. Denial is a save now, pay later scheme. Gavin DeBecker. I will love you, embrace you, and get so still to hear your sweet message to me. Oh, discernment, my trustworthy friend. Chris DeVorce.
So this is Discernment Part 1. James Finley, a Merton scholar, as in Thomas Merton, and clinical psychologist, is regarded by Carolyn Mace as the finest in the spiritual healing of trauma. His words have set me free. We must be fierce protectors of ours and others' wholeness. To be able to do that, we must be skilled with discernment. We cannot walk through life open-hearted without discerning who we walk with. I've always been at war with my discernment. I cherished it as a huge gift and resented it for the disturbance to my positive outlook. An incredibly high positive mental attitude, they call it a PMA, has been a grace that has carried me through rough seas where the shore was nowhere in sight. But it has its liabilities. Discernment requires we face the sad, difficult, and painful. A couple of years ago, I saw something in a man, now that's more than a couple years ago, this was in 2016, who was close friends with someone I know. I had heard amazing things about him and was excited to meet him. I think you know who I'm talking about. When we finally met, he appeared loving and caring, but I knew something wasn't right. He has a huge halo, which is the concept of the halo effect, where you see certain qualities and then you attribute other qualities to them. You're under a halo and say, oh, like even people that are good looking are seen as more intelligent or something, or they have this quality and then we, put all these other qualities under there. He's known to contribute positively to lives. Maybe that's true. But each time I was around him, it caused dissonance in me that he could be so gifted and equipped. To attribute to him these positive traits that I personally didn't experience would be me coming under his halo. Although I didn't know him well, I always felt unsafe and uncomfortable around him. It was really about what I was picking up of how his ego was always competing with me. Everything was so threatened by his standing in the community and how he was seen, his image in the community. I did get to know him, quote unquote, well enough to confirm my early hits of intuition. But I was at war with myself to not acknowledge my discernment because he wasn't only those negative things either. Riley, this is bringing back what we talked about in a couple episodes before of patterns that I had. And you're like, why was I doing that? Did you not have the discernment? It's like, I said, no, I did have that discernment. But it's like, again, the psyche, that's someone not looking out for you to kind of help you through your wounds that cause us to ride over our discernment. When I registered my discernment, my voice came at me as though Krista stood to my right. She threatened me. How dare you see that? Isn't that interesting? That other voice was like shutting me down because you know what it's bringing me back to? The chapter, the women who run with the wolves. and how Dr. Estes talks about how women have this dark man in their own psyche that shuts them down. We think it's the men in society that shut women down, but women have that internalized, that they shut themselves, their own seeing, they shut that down.
So you're saying that your discernment was getting shut down based on other people's experience? So
Okay,
other people's
I was saying-
experience was overriding your own discernment?
Yes, and how how disturbing it is to have discernment. That is the courageous because it ruined you. You're no longer invited to the party.
Well, to have discernment is to choose to not go with the crowd.
To not go with the crowd, to miss out, to the cost of discernment. You miss out on all the fun sometimes, the opportunities, because your soul, it's always where your soul is on a different path.
But you're also stopping yourself from putting yourself in an environment that would probably cause you to be abused or taken advantage of, right?
Or living
at
in
what cost is it really?
And living in no integrity.
Right.
Living in no, like abandoning myself. It's like that quote that I say, to get some people to like me, I would have to lose my soul, sell my soul.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. It's a selling of our souls when we go, can't see that. And I remember that very energy so many times in my life, like, I can't see that. The cost is too great. And the great thing about non-dual consciousness, the contemplative mind, it is the skill, and it is a lifelong skill to learn this, to be able to hold on to the discernment or the healthy anger, but not have the ego take over with that. And so you have a discernment, but it doesn't have to go to this devaluing any other human being. You take that second look, that contemplative look, that can look upon them with love and acceptance of their humanity and divinity. And then if you go, I can do that, then I can see whatever I do need to see. And it's always that, again, that balance of how we work with our discernment with that. Well, and I'm talking about when Krista, I'm going back to, she threatened me, how dare you see that? And I said, well, that caught my attention. I stood up to her, basically telling her to fuck off. And immediately this fierceness came over me. Then this rush of life force went through my body and positioned me forward. I had integrated 50 years of lost integrity and energy that I could have used to live my life. I was the one who shut me down all these years. I knew at that moment I would never be the same. And that is true. Like, I was listening to Richard Rohr yesterday. He just turned 80, and he was on a podcast, and he was talking about, the gifts of getting older. And he goes, great insight, it doesn't happen in a moment. It's a gradual. Like the change, it's gradual. And that's the gift of getting, to 80. And I think that's true. It's like, yes, I was changed in a moment, and gradually I am stepping more and more into this ability to not censor my discernment.
Would you say maybe that you were changed in the moment, but the opportunity to apply that change takes time?
Yes, that gets locked in and strengthened. But it's like when you have an awareness and you go, that is me. And I like even things in my life that I knew I was doing, but I didn't know how to stop doing. Right? Yeah. And then you go, oh, but I can have the power to choose, because it's again coming back to our soul, that we don't abandon the great love affair with that, which is not the narcissistic ego. It is truly the soul that is so beautiful and life-giving and serves anything that is life in you or another or in the world, right? I've shut down my discernment in part because of shame and abuse in my past. I have also used energy to shut down my discernment when I felt I was the only one who saw it. But we are never the only one. Our tribe sees it, or they'll get on board immediately when we share what we experienced. You know, and if they don't get on board, it's like they're probably not your tribe, right? Now, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say your tribe usually trusts your discernment, and if there is any room to question it, they question it from a healthy place of trying to get more information, not in a trying to override your discernment.
Right, because like sometimes people will call it intuition, and it needs to be questioned because it's not intuition. It's their own feedback loop of where they have censored and only picked data to tell them a story that almost like hits their trauma or their judgments of the person, right? They're not whole seeing, and they call it like they know people's motives, and they know exactly why someone did something, and then they call that intuition. And if it's truly intuition, it would stand up to being questioned and looking at data and looking at assumptions, right?
Love that.
Because not everything that's quote unquote intuition is truly intuition, as Gavin DeBecker or Carolyn Mace would say.
Well, a lot of people make large assumptions and call that intuition.
Intuition, right? And go, well, or like, I don't agree with that. Someone just goes to me recently, like, I'm like, well, based on what data, you know?
Right? They just emotionally don't agree with it.
Yeah, they just go like, that can't be right. Well, what if it is? What if it is right about the population of the world and what's going on and, you know, people not having children and like, it's just, well, I don't agree with that. And they'll call that almost like an intuitive, or they know what their ex-husband's motives are all the time. You know, they could never be wrong, that kind of thing. Now, if someone tries to shut down my discernment as though my reality doesn't exist, my new phrase is, my discernment isn't aligned with yours. That's my phrase. That's what I need to say, in fact, to someone recently. Like, oh, they're just so good. And I'm like, you know, my discernment isn't aligned with yours. That is a really fair way of saying it. I don't apologize for seeing what I do. I don't promote their unconscious behavior by permitting it. When I realize someone isn't part of my tribe, I tell myself one of Leo's father's famous malaprops, where he humorously misuses words. They're not of my ilk. Versus ilk, I thought that was funny. But it's a skill to see dualistically and see and love non-dualistically, the contemplative mind that holds both. We see where someone talks east and walks west and hold their dignity and divinity at the same time. We hold both, and we need to be honest with those around us with what we experience, even if it doesn't go with the company line. Gavin DeBecker, known by some as the foremost authority on violence prevention, wrote the book, The Gift of Fear. He explains the phenomenon of our intuition that often signals to us in our bodies things our minds aren't able to process because the data points come at us too quickly. We know something isn't right, and we better not shut it down if we're going to be fierce protectors of ours or others' wholeness. He would say, like, you know, you're in a car in front of a 7-Eleven, and you in the rear, you say you're in the passenger seat, and you see in the rear view mirror some person walking by with a hoodie, and they kind of have their arms in there, and you don't know why, you just got to chill. And you couldn't process how quickly you went like, oh my God, it looks like there's a gun in the way he's holding his hands. And you're right, like certain things you go like, why did I just get a chill? Why did that happen to me because we get all this warning signals, and we have to be very careful. And Gavin DeBecker did talk about this, and I'm going to say this. Some of this quote unquote anti-racism stuff that's come out has been very dangerous to our discernment, because if we are so afraid that someone who doesn't look like us, that we might be racist if we see something, we have to be like, if we have a pure heart, then we can see what we need to see. And people are like, oh no, if you think that, that's only race. It's like,
well, there's a great example of that happened in New York, where the couple was sitting on the bench and a man walks up and cuts her boyfriend's throat and kills him on the spot. And it was a black man and a white couple, and the woman refused to. I actually believe she told the cops at first the wrong ethnicity of the man, because of her fear of not wanting to perpetuate a racial stuff. So literally she tells the cops that it was a white man. They can't find this white man. She goes way later go, well, actually it was a black guy. Or I think to a point of like, she didn't even want to cooperate, even though this man cut her boyfriend's throat in front of her. She still was more worried about this being anti-racist.
Yeah, being anti-racist. I knew when I got my epic integration moment with my split parts, it was a game changer. Because of all I've been through in life, I have scary good radar. That's true. I see things in people's faces, their voices, their bodies that tell me something isn't in line or in the light or in line with love.
Yeah, I find this, my phrase I love to do is, once you stop lying to yourself, you start noticing the lies that others are telling. And I find that that's what rings true to me, where it's like, I don't need to know the truth, but your lies will resonate at another frequency that makes my skin crawl. And so to me, that's very much in line with what you are so much about. You're always looking for, where are you lying to yourself? And you're always searching that out and getting it out of your own story. And so when you have that out of your story, you're able to pick up all the other lies that other people are telling themselves. Mm-hmm. Because I believe lies and truth have different frequencies, and the more in tune and aware we are with our own lies and our own truths, the easier it is to notice it in others.
Yeah, and I think that to really acknowledge that that's where we need accountability partners and talk this stuff through, because we're just learning more and more in neuroscience about what that we might learn in a few years, going, oh, that actually is why you were picking that up. But I would see things in the way I would see something right here, and I was right. Like, oh, he is a sexual predator, and there's something and then I would see it in someone else, and that's right. And isn't that wild? And you go, well, that doesn't make sense. What's that about? Well, it is in my world. Because I'll see something, and it's always 100% right.
Because you're seeing the bigger picture. You're not in the restricted awareness. You're not being overridden by other people's stories. You are going to the bigger picture, and when you go to the bigger picture, you see more details that other people cannot.
Yeah, but I mean, like I would have this when I was 16 years old. So it's also a gift. And I think that came from, I was living in a lot of more inner stillness and doing this, trying to discern, because I was trying to protect myself. I just didn't have the boundary work and in touch with my own healthy anger to set those boundaries. But I saw it, and that was what's so interesting.
You wouldn't always.
You wouldn't always know. Oh no, I think I forgot some.
Okay.
Tell someone isn't in line love. I also see things mystically that represent to me what I should run from. DeBecker warns us when we are deeply intrigued and curious, we should run. I missed that part in his book when I read it over, now 20-something years ago, and I have reread it over the years. Now I get it. That's that curiosity thing that's like, when I say it's it's like an ego-driven going, it's the not childlike. It's almost like this rebellious nature to wisdom. I'm going to keep confirming what I know. I'm going to keep diving in. I'm into the psychic checking this out, which is not good at all. It's really... You wouldn't always know I have sharp discernment by some of the scoundrels I've been entangled with, but I always knew when I knew in a big way. I find that true with some of my friends. They have fabulous discernment, but shame or wounds interfered with their ability to stand in it. It was the shaming voice of the other Krista that shut me down. Since I took shaming Krista down, that's what she was, shaming, I'm ready to climb the mountain and look out from the precipice as a watchtower for what awaits us. And with my commitment to my accountability partners, who I honestly voice what I experience, I'm convinced if I have to trust one person in the world to look out for me, I'd pick me. That me is the part of me that lives deeply in my body. She's a redwood tree, a blackbird, an eagle. The other part is just a temptation that floats outside my body, above my head, on the right side, and talks in this annoyingly airy high voice. She doesn't want me to be present. She isn't my integrity or my true self. She's just my coping mechanism I developed to survive my crazy life. Now I've come home to myself. I don't need that group whose membership requires I listen to shaming Krista, who tries to seduce me to look the other way. I think I scared her off with my fierceness, so she may not come around again. Our discernment is there to show us who is our tribe in the first place. My experience tells me there's no loss when we lose what costs us our discernment. That's the paradoxical, right? We lose, but we don't lose. The infinity loop is what heals our trauma and allows us to trust ourselves again. Because the infinity loop is what makes us aware of what's really going on in our bodies, our minds, and the world, it wakes us up to what really is. It allows us to see the true nature of things, and that underneath what really is goodness. When we can see the goodness of ourself, that's what sets us free. What keeps us from the goodness is fear. Fear is what causes us to make up stories that aren't true, like, I can't stand up to this person. I can't say no. I'm not allowed. When we see what really is the goodness, we can register what isn't good. When we see our true self, our Wonder Woman, our Alpha Woman, we wake up, or Superman, we wake up to that and see that's our real self. Our real self isn't that person who lives in fear and scarcity and needs to please other people to have a sense of self. The infinity loop allows us to come home to ourself and trust our deepest intuition. It sets us free from illusion. We see differently and put on a different mind. That's discernment. Now I quickly respond to my discernment like in obedience to it. Yes and no.
Well, I think, again, it's just one of those things that's a practice. The more in tune and the more in touch you are with the discernment, the easier it is to listen to it. But as we live a less needing for discernment, we sometimes forget that tool. And we need to be reminded on how important it is and how to go back to it.
That's being a warrior, right? That's being fully mature. That's being initiated. Now I quickly, because now I trust it fully. The great love affair gave me the foundation because it showed me I'm worth protecting and that I don't need to split from my truth for anyone outside of myself. I walk through life now honoring my fire, my anger, my boundaries, my wholeness within myself, and my full embodiment that senses and sees. I celebrate my discernment as the gift it is. That celebration is my amends to myself that I will no longer betray myself. This guidance is front and center every day. My discernment is my homecoming. I would say there's times I don't honor my discernment because of my openness, open to other people's kind of pushback. And, and then you have to almost realize, oh, you know what, that person that's giving me pushback, my time with them actually is over in this life. We are not aligned for many different reasons. The world that awaits me honors my discernment, and where it's always my welcome friend. If we don't use our discernment, love it like the friend it is, will invite more trauma into our lives that could have been avoided. Today, I will be a fierce protector of mine and others' wholeness.
Now, some discernment questions for all those out there. Do you have an annoying voice that tries to shut down your discernment? Do you ever leave your body awareness because the discernment coming into your body is making you feel so uncomfortable?
Okay, so I'd love to have you talk on that. I mean, your discernment, you have much better discernment now that you're honoring things like I would bring up to you when you were younger and you're like...
Well, I think a lot of my overriding of my discernment in my life was my own inadequacy and my own desire for connection and friendships, to where I didn't feel like I was bringing enough to the relationship to where I would override the red flags for the desire of the relationship. Or I would say, oh, I'm not smart enough to make that assessment of someone. They must know more than me, so let me override my discernment and let them drive the ship, which just created so many more problems in my life because I was letting someone else lead my life instead of myself. And a lot of that just roots from insecurities and feeling lack.
Because you have great discernment. Now.
Well, I love myself in a way that I did not in my 20s. I have been putting the work in to myself as an individual, whether it's spiritual or physical. I believe they all kind of, the more spiritual and the more physical work, the more confidence you have, and the more when struggles or problems come up, you don't have to override your own experience because you have enough opportunities for these types of situations. Right? Like I don't leave my body when trouble comes because I know me and my body are the best thing to solve that trouble, instead of looking for the solution outside of myself. Discernment is a great interrupter of business as usual. In what ways and for what reason do you ever censor your discernment and make it bad? I could imagine people at workplaces. It's so easy to go, well, I need this job, so I don't feel safe to bring this up. And I would argue that...
Or to even see it.
Right. Well, right. Like, you're unwilling.
I can't see that. That costs too much.
But I would argue that it costs more not seeing it, whether it's to your own integrity and loving yourself, because I think you degrade your love for yourself when you override the discernment because you're betraying yourself. And or if it is a business as well, whatever loss comes from that discernment, I think will gain 10 times more in value of creating a healthy company and a healthy environment for people to be working in. So I would encourage anyone, no matter what you see as the possible loss, you have 10 times more to gain from speaking your truth and speaking your discernment. And I don't mean that as a trying to shame people for the place they are coming from, because not everyone has the elegance of being kind and speaking in that way, but coming from a place of you're not going to let the bullshit slide. Do you ever feel bad about yourself for discerning something that others aren't and feel you're not a team player or loving enough? Yeah, you're nodding your head. Is there something that comes to mind of when this has happened for you?
It's allowing yourself to truly be your unique soul self for me. And that's such a great opportunity when someone goes, oh, they're so precious. Oh, or they're just these you're supposed, and it's just this ooey gooey spirituality, this ooey gooey, all good. There's no discernment in there. There's no both and. There's no grounding. It's just
the phrase I like to hear, or that I hear from so many, is, oh, you just need to love them. Oh, if only we could just love everybody and the love would solve everything. Mm-hmm. And I love that statement, and it sounds great and all, but to me, with love without discernment is cult. Is a cult.
There's no wisdom,
right? But
that's a higher love.
That's a choosing to follow the cult. That's
the cult.
That's choosing to follow people off of the cliff. The whole. Would you do that if your friends did it, and you go, well, yeah. If you don't have discernment, you are going to do exactly what the group is doing, and it's sad to see. To see, and I'd say that this is a call for us all to remember what our discernment looks like, and to really look in our own lives where we're choosing to go with the pack and fighting our own discernment. Part 2. Intuition is always right in at least 2 important ways. It's always in response to something. It always has your best interest at heart. Gavin DeBecker.
I have clear discernment that cuts through everything. I see and know that I know. My experience and expertise all line up. When you said, do you doubt your discernment? That's true. I do not doubt. When I see it, I don't doubt it. Like, that's the part that you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so clear. It comes at a mystical awareness as well. But then it's as though I forget it when I come under the spell of the person's normal behavior. It's not that others don't have enjoyable qualities. It's that of the things that are non-negotiable to me, I cannot hang with what's intolerable to my integrity. My discernment is screaming. Just like we need to hold fast to our moments that transcend our fear and powerlessness and liberate us from our suffering, we must hold fast to our discernment. That's an awareness that comes from our instincts. There's an awareness that comes from our instincts that's given to us as a gift. We must not squander the gift. And those are our survival instincts that are not bad, that religion, can sometimes try to make bad. It's like, no, that is trying to keep you alive. That is God-given. The teaching in the Women Who Run with the Wolves chapters about how we take the key and unlock the door of what's unconscious in us, or what is hidden but needs to be explored, helps us listen to our intuition. It may come as a body reaction, an emotional reaction, something you quote unquote hear, something that you hear yourself saying. That's a big one. A vision or dream, or a familiar pattern you see. You may see things in people's eyes, face, body parts, or discern something is off with their emotional reactions or speech patterns. I really recognize when someone's being false. I recognize it in their speech patterns. It can be as though, not always, sometimes it's really smooth, but there's also some, not always, but when I do, it's like, oh, I can really pick up certain
to me, that's back to that frequency of when someone is really speaking the truth, you feel it in your bone. And when someone's really being deceptive, you feel that in your bones too.
You feel it.
It just feels a little different.
You feel, oh God. That's why we have to really stay in our bodies and not come under the spell, because the spell gets us ungrounded, right? Mm-hmm. So if we're under their spell, we can't access that. All of a sudden, we're like, oh, we go all ooey gooey. It can be as though you hear a snap and you say to yourself, that's not true. That's exactly happened to me. You see something in someone, and because you've been around someone else with the same pathology, you recognize it. They all use the same playbook. I once consulted with a company helping them build their culture and their sales team. It was working beautifully. They then brought some new buck in with a big ego and a small man's complex. When he walked in, before he opened his mouth, I saw, quote unquote, him holding a fire hose, extinguishing the fire that was burning in the hearts, bellies, and culture, and all the work that had been laid out. We built a culture of love and inspiration. He was going to turn it into the military. I tried to get the CEO's attention, but he wouldn't listen. He was getting off, quote unquote, mentoring him. Plus, he liked the military attitude, even though the fruit of this young man's impact wasn't helping the company nor the bottom line. And the irony of it is the performance that we got, we were crushing the competitors. When you have a culture of love and inspiration, people want to be on time. The numbers were just through the roof. We were making, it wasn't again ooey gooey. We were making the company money because we had gotten the talent to be so invested because they were on board. Yeah. I knew from Gavin DeBecker's work on violence prevention that we need to be careful how we treat people and not trigger their shame. No one would listen. When I saw the way he and his cohorts treated people, fired people, bullied people, I said, someday someone is going to come into this company and shoot someone. I said that to Leo. I parted ways with the company after that. The young man was eventually fired for the reasons I had pointed to the CEO, but it was too late. The culture had already been created and a disaster was waiting to happen. 3.5 years later, someone came in and shot and killed the CEO. Why I would ever doubt my discernment after that is beyond me. We must do the work on ourselves to let die all the parts of us that kill off our discernment. And when I mean die, it's a detaching from. It's going, this is no longer, I no longer need this false quality to get along with this world. The shaming part, I can let that part of me just fall away. Why I would ever doubt my discernment after that is beyond me. We must do the work on ourselves to let die all the parts. All the pleasing, all the leaving our bodies and hearts when they hurt to get our attention. All the ways we allow another to make us a caged bird. When I told a relative about the struggle I was having with the young man, destroying the work, she shamed me and told me it was just my ego. She was very into the new age spirituality and would just flippantly say these kind of comments. After that, I regrettably lost it with the young man in quote unquote, not my finest moment. It wasn't my healthy ego sense of self that stood in my discernment that was the problem, as my relative tried to say. It was my unskilled, ego-driven delivery when I was triggered with this man that was the problem. I will do anything and everything since that event now 16 years ago to never lose my cool again like that. One can use one's ego strength to give pushback and give a damn how people are treated or if someone is a pathological liar or dangerous. Our being afraid that someone will think we have a big ego when we stand up to abuse or power will not serve anyone. We need to be okay being judged. We just don't confront people without emotional sobriety or out of an ego position that's separate, superior, and important. But we don't let others shut down our discernment. Ultimately, we do it to ourselves when we split from our deepest truth. I have not acted on my discernment when the situation is tied in with a wound. I'm clear when it comes to my work because my personal issues aren't usually triggered. However, in my personal life, I've ignored my discernment because my compulsions were more seductive than my most trusted friend, discernment. Now, almost 8 years ago, I saw a website of a man who I left Leo for. When I looked through his site, I got the strong hit, charlatan. I actually said that word to myself. I felt a strong aversion and was turned off. After a few months, this man's name came up again, and it was suggested I meet him because it appeared we had a lot to talk about, as we were both coaches. Me being too open at the time, and I think there was a boredom in life that was just needing, meeting with people or stimulation. There's a vulnerability to if you're not getting enough juicy life stuff.
If you don't have your tribe, you're searching for your tribe. And when you're searching for a tribe, it's the easiest for someone to deceive you because you're so open and desiring that connection.
Yeah, that's really exactly what happened. I went ahead and met him. My not holding fast to the bad sense I got regarding this man, which is really what I should have been walking in with. Going, let's confirm. Remember, Krista, along with my curiosity got the best of me. I even liked the emojis he sent back to me when he confirmed our meeting. Leo didn't want to go with me. I begged Leo to go with me. That was when our our partnership, we never got married, was just at its last leg. And I'm like, please go with me. And he didn't want to. That first meeting was right out of a textbook on pathological encounters. I was under his spell. All my issues were activated. Oh, just shaming me at that I wasn't submitting to him enough to his starting to do this coaching thing at me sitting at the bar. And he was just shaming me for not submitting to him. It was just really interesting. 4.5 months later, I witnessed him doing the exact same seduction, this like stupid speech thing he does, speech to someone else. I was too afraid to confront him. Someone else's praise of this man threw me off my intuition as well. Through the next 4 visits with him, I felt both these strong hits of discernment that something wasn't right that contrasted with warm and fuzzy familiar feelings. I had an almost irresistible pull. This is what they say a lot about, when you meet someone and there's a ton of sparks between you sexually, like it's usually your trauma that's getting triggered. I had an almost irresistible pull towards sexual bonding. I mean, no reason that I should be feeling that because I was in no way like attracted to him. He puts out that energy widely, I quickly realized. Since I've only felt sexual attraction to a handful in my life, I thought it meant something. It did, but not in a healthy way. Between the time I met this man and the 5th visit, 3-week span, my petite body had lost 7 pounds. I was in a total spin. We met those 5 times to explore working together and him coaching me. I wanted to bond with this man just to end the total body freak out I was going through. And his coaching me was like he was going to up-level me we were trying to get a film project going, like he was going to refine me, up-level me, which is such a joke. I thought what was happening in my body was moving me toward uniting with this man. Clearly, I was so confused. The sexual pull that felt like life was as counterfeit as everything else was. The 5th meeting, I told him I wasn't supposed to be there. I felt like I couldn't talk. I couldn't get words out because I wasn't supposed to talk. I told him I wasn't going to have any further contact with him and thought I should leave it at that. Something was very, very wrong. He, being a coach, told me I should speak. He didn't support my guidance system that was giving me a no. That went against what I know a coach should do. I ignored that. He told me later he knew exactly what I was going to say, that I had feelings for him. Once I did tell him, I felt even more creepy. I told him it didn't make sense and couldn't be right. Something else was tripping me up. I can't remember the exact words, but it was something to the effect that I should take the thought that we can't be together off the table. That's what he said. Like, you need to take that off. The thought that we can't be together, you take that off the table. Of course, for the next 6 months, which was the length of the relationship, I would tell the story without any of the discernment parts. It was a match made in heaven, and I was so responsive to being led. How cute and magical it was all going to be. My life's work was going to be connected with this man. And that's that part of not making U-turns that has been a pattern of mine because I don't have the accountability. It's like you make a bad mistake and then you've got to convince the rest of the world. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think this is back to your strength being your weakness, of your ability to truly see the best in everyone and see the best out of a situation that might have a 1% chance of happening, but you see it as a for sure thing happening because you have this beautiful ability to stay in the positive and see the light in a situation. But without the discernment, when some people can use that to manipulate you and take you down a dark path.
Yeah. And whatever trauma bond I had to make it make sense to me of my decision, and that there would be some sort of happy ending. After that 5th meeting, I told Leo that I had to pursue this and figure out what it all meant. It was an intense pull that felt like destiny. This man told me later that he saw what I did for Leo and wanted it for himself. I abandoned a man I love to be used by a man who never loved me. And I remember when he came over to my house, I said to Leo, this was like the 2nd visit. I said, something is going on with this guy. I don't know what it is. Something is pulling me in. Do not get on the phone with this person that he was talking to every night. I need you to be with me. I need you to look out with me. Do not leave me alone with him. Do not leave me alone with this man at the table. And Leo left to the other room, and this man just started it was a spell. I was pulled in. His rage, lust, control, greed, and megalomania came up immediately in the relationship. I saw it all, but shame shut it down, and deep trauma in the face of such pathology ensued. I told Leo about the shaming, controlling way this man spoke to me during a quote-unquote coaching session and how I thought it was good for me. He was speechless. I thought I deserved the way he treated me. Only someone doing something so wrong, me, would be treated so horribly by an esteemed coach. I owned his disowned shame for his behavior, even though it was against everything I believed to be right. It hit every lie that I was bad and needed fixing. The sexual relationship was shameful, debasing, abusive, using, and horrifying. I feel the need to make amends to all women for allowing myself to be treated that way. This book is part of my amends. Our relationship was on the brink of ending about every 3 days. I was paying a very high price for ignoring my discernment. But mercy had the last word. I went through a miraculous recovery and healed my lifelong wounds and faced my shadow that caused me to ignore my discernment. I knew even when I was in it, this was going to be the abuse to end all abuse. I was going to figure this out, wrestle with the angel, and come out renamed. I was going to come out more whole, and I was going to get healed. I needed to tell this story because thousands of women will read this. Oh, let's hope thousands hear this and feel where they too have ignored their guidance system. Being so damn vague to protect myself and my pride and protect someone who shouldn't be protected or avoid being criticized by those who don't agree doesn't serve truth. There's a time and place to question ourselves. When is when we've selected only certain data to tell ourselves a story about the situation. And we're calling it intuition when it's not necessarily so. I'm not talking about that kind of certitude that isn't receptive to disconfirming data. I'm talking about true discernment that sees the inconsistencies of what, quote unquote, comes out of the heart, the mouth speaks. It's from the Bible. Out of the heart, the mouth speaks. And you're not okay with what's in their heart. And they're not interested in having a change of heart. It's when we sense one has guile and we just don't trust them. Proceed with caution if you have to proceed. We must not drop those moments just because it's hard for our brains to reconcile the red flags with their likability in other areas. Hold fast to the truth. We've earned our discernment from the hard lessons we've had to endure. We need to be kind to ourselves and have concern for those that need our protection and not for those who may be the ones who use, abuse, and deceive for their own gain. Women have a lifetime of being told, coached, berated into not paying attention to discernment. That is true. We as women have ignored this gift for so long, we no longer recognize it. This is a key part of Dr. Estie's work in Women Who Run with the Wolves. We must hold on to our women's intuition, listen, and trust it. We women feel shame because we know something is wrong and we let it happen anyway. But we need to turn that shame into power and use it to stoke the fire in our bellies. The enlightenment that happens when we listen and do something about it is pretty cool. Discernment is a lifelong skill that helps us keep us on the right path with the right travel buddies by our side.
So for me, really what was coming up to was the kind of difference in what discernment maybe looks like for men. And what was coming up to was kind of the importance of having discernment with friendships. You know, I see many men that will write off negative behavior of a man because they've just been friends for a long time. And the more and more I see the importance of, you know, we are a product of who we hang out with, that I don't believe you can separate your connection to a friend to a one-time bad behavior, because I don't really believe most of these bad behaviors are a one-time thing. And I believe that I believe all behavior is contagious, whether it's positive or negative. What we choose to be around will emulate through us. And so when we choose to be around people that are continuously making negative choices for themselves and for the group, it's going to wear off on you no matter how good you are at creating your boundaries. By choosing to stay friends with that person, you are inviting that type of energy into your life, at least in my opinion. And I think that that's one thing as a man and other men, I see the importance of remembering what we need to be discerning.
Yeah, that's good. And I'm thinking about that for women too. It's the holding the both, right? I'm loving you, but what are you going to do about it? You're just going to be an alcoholic the rest of your life?
Right. You can love someone and still have the discernment to go that this person being in your life isn't helping you or them.
And what they may need is you just to hold the thing. And what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about your...
Well, if they're really a friend, you need to step into your accountability buddy's space and hold them accountable.
Yeah.
Recall a time when you forgot your discernment about someone because you came under their spell or likability. How did that end up hurting you, your ability to integrate or your ability to stand in your truth? I think this is important for people to remember that we all kind of go through this, and that's why it's important to remember why we have our discernment and when to bring it out.
And when we don't make everything all black and white, we hold both. This person is this and that thing, and they
and I think a big thing to remember the difference of discernment and judgment, right? So much, I don't believe discernment is a form of judging. I feel like a discernment is a form of acknowledging the information you're being provided and making the decisions that are the most safe for you and your well-being. Judgment is coming from you know better than the person, and you are putting them below you because of what you're seeing.
That's great.
In what ways will you use your accountability partners to process your discernment to keep you from forgetting it once you get all warm and fuzzy for someone again? I think it's real easy for friends and relationships to override our discernment because we get so excited about the potential of the friendship or the sexual relationship. When we put those rosy glasses on, we forget the importance of our discernment.
Yeah, like if I had sat with you and said, "Okay, this is what I was feeling, charlatan. Let's unpack that encounter." That would have.
Well, if we had half the relationship that we have now than we did then, it wouldn't have even required that because I would have been asking so many questions before the relationship ever took the steps that you would have never made that jump because I would have asked the right questions and they would have had the reflection in you. And I mean, ultimately what I am hearing and feeling and seeing from as we go back into that story with Leo, there was no questions. Leo had written, there was no more questions coming from Leo, who was supposed to be your accountability buddy. And if
he was in crisis in his life.
Right,
yeah.
But it really would have just taken a handful of times him being present and asking questions that would have lit up all your markers that would have protected you.
And it was really what I needed. You know what it triggered to is I needed the healing that would have broken even the fact that I would have ever been susceptible to him in the first place. That's the irony of how, you know, our bad choices can lead to our deepest healing too.
How does discernment show up for you? Messages in your head, body, and motions. This is kind of my example was my skin crawls. You know, when I'm around liars, you know, I feel it like literally in my skin. And then what...
You see fake too. You see fake. Like when someone's not, you pick up if someone is low empathy. You're pretty you really have come into your body. You went from someone who was not in your body for wanting relationships to being so okay, being willing to see what you need to see.
Oh, I find it very interesting, though, too, the more we make the healthy choices, the easier that those spiritual choices become. It's like as I become healthier in my body, it's easier to have the spiritual connection with my body. And last but not least, what do I need to see, discern, wake up in my world? What relationships are not serving you that you need to have discernment with, that maybe could be a root of a lot of your problems and struggles and trauma. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us on this adventure of the Infinity Loop. Hopefully these tools have brought some light and helpful into your life and perspective and how you can apply them to yours. Please feel free to reach out, write questions. We'd love to help in any way we can. Share this message with others that you think would be helpful. And thank you for joining us on this adventure. Till next time.